We're lucky today. David Kindopp is back for another story from his fabulous writing. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Rebecca.
It's great to have you back.
It's great to be here.
Our topic today is really a controversial one, and that's why we chose it.
That's right. That's why I wrote about it.
Yeah, it is great. So tell us just exactly, what is this topic about today, Dave?
Well, this topic today is about bullfighting. You know, bravo, right?
Right, the great, long-lasting tradition
Right, tradition, right. Yeah.
of Spanish bullfighting.
Right. Yeah, living in Mexico and having gone to one bullfight many years ago and talking to people about bullfighting, of course, it just comes up how controversial it is and how some people are so appalled by it and some people think it's just the greatest thing in the Mexican culture. And I personally don't like it, as evidenced by my writing. And so I just thought it was really interesting to do a short piece about bullfighting.
I think it is too.
Yeah.
When you wrote this article, you wrote it because it was so controversial, and I loved the different aspects that you brought out about it. Let's engage and get into that. Let's tell the folks what that was all about.
Well, you're talking about in terms of the history of bullfighting, in terms of aspects, in other words, what the origins are, to start
Yes,
with?
that, and then I want to go into justification or not.
Sure. Well, I think it begins with the origins, which are, I guess, murky at best when you do research, but what I've found is that according to internet research, Wikipedia, and some other sources, that the origins go clear back to the days of, the Roman Colosseum, which I wrote about in this piece, and where, animals were brought into the Colosseum from all over the world and killed and sacrificed. And that's kind of what they say is a holdover, from the gladiator days, and that just seeped into quote unquote Mexican tradition. When in the old days, it was a lot of people on horseback originally who were rounding up and killing the bulls, and then there were people on the ground that were helping, and then later on the folks running around on the ground took more of an active role, and then they became the more serious players, the matadors, if you will.
In those days, there's a division argument whether or not they were killing for blood, sport, or meat. So let's define the concepts out in the middle, way back in the beginning.
Well, we're talking about bullfighting, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, sure, there's definitely an opinion about what the reason is, and I think the opinion is supported by what people want it to be. I don't think there's any real definite proof about how it started or why. And I think if you call it like Hemingway and all these other authors have called it a mixture of ballet and bravery and all these different things and theater, you can make believe it's that, but it ain't that. I personally think it's just purely about blood sport.
Well, I think that if it's ballet and theater, it is about entertainment. That's self-explanatory.
Well, in that regard, it could be entertainment, but then it still centers around blood sport. I mean, I make the case that, if it's about, a lot of Mexicans and gringos say it's about ballet and it's about theater, and acting and all these things. Well, my position is if it's about ballet, then people would be going to the ballet in Mexico. And they aren't, they're going to the bullfights. It's about theater. Shakespeare in the Park would be a big deal in Mexico, and it isn't. I mean, I think it's just BS that you create the reality you want to justify your passion for blood sport.
There was a great myth about blood being purifying and etc. Did they kill them for food, or did they kill them for sport? Why did they kill all those animals?
That's a good question, and I didn't do any homework about actually what that was about in the days of the Roman Colosseum. But how can you bring in elephants and tigers and those kinds of things from all around the planet and put them in the Colosseum, which they did, and kill them for meat. I mean, you don't kill an elephant for meat, right? I mean,
I've never heard of it.
No, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, you know. It's and we all and there were the gladiators that, you know, that killed each other for the entertainment of people, and they weren't meat, you know, they weren't food. I mean, I think it's all about blood sport, and there's a part of humanity, there's a deep shadow part of a portion of humanity that is fascinated by blood sport.
I think it's blood sport too.
Right.
I can't comprehend why, if you're going to kill an animal for meat, even if you need the meat, you would kill him the most humane way you could kill him, one would imagine.
Right, right.
Quickly, painlessly if you can.
Right.
You know, maybe
Sure.
knock him out of his reality
Right.
in one moment,
Right.
if you can.
Right.
And bullfighting doesn't do anything like that.
Oh, no. It's an amazing, torturous event for the bull. And I just find it fascinating that people still think that it's okay. And they compare it to, well, gee, if you're going to raise cows in a confined lot, or if you're going to even raise cows in a pasture and you raise them and you let them have a nice life and then you kill them, that's worse. They're saying it's worse than bullfighting, you know, raising cows in confinement and then raising them for slaughter is worse than a bull being raised on the ranch because he has his wonderful life before he's put in the bull ring. Well, to me, that just doesn't.
Well, that doesn't compare because a ranch is not a place of torture.
Right. Oh, exactly. Right.
It's a place where they're protected from the cougars and whatever, and they're
Right.
fed,
Right.
and they don't have to walk miles to get the food, so you can look at that any way you want to. I think the concept here is, are we, as humanity, a good portion of us, making a sport out of torture?
Right. Yeah. Oh, I think that's what it is exactly. I mean, it can't be. How can it be anything other than that? When you can fill up a stadium and watch an animal literally be tortured.
Because it is a torturous thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Explain to the public exactly what happens in a bullfight.
Well, I only went to one bullfight, and that was all I could handle. And that was a long, long time ago in Mexico. And everybody said, "Oh, let's go to the bullfight." And I didn't know. Okay, you know, let's go to the bullfight. And so basically, you know, there's usually 2 or 3 matadors. One of them, they somehow pick who comes out first. They draw straws for which bull they get. The bull comes out, and of course, the first thing that happens, as I recall, is that the bull is the matador comes out, teases the bull. I think makes a few probably what you would call brave passes, and the bull is you know, displayed, and everybody gets excited and cheers. And then the picadors come out on their horses that are now padded, and they come out and they taunt the bull, and then they throw these long blades into between the shoulder blades back up in here. So the plan is to cut the muscles in the bull's shoulder so that he can't run and fight as effectively, of course, if he wasn't damaged, and then to start him bleeding out. So they jab these long blades into the bull between his shoulder blades from their horses, and they'll literally get the blade in and then just use their weight to jam it in, pull it out, cut the bull's muscles, and then the bandoleros come along with their sharp barbs, and they throw those into the bull, and they're trying to get those all in the same place, so it further disables the bull. And then the bandoliers stay in the bull in their long sticks with the little flags on them, so they're all waving around. And meanwhile, the bull is being pursued and cut and bled out, so he weakens. And then the matador can then come in and be the hero and taunt the bull some more and come up right up next to him, and then theoretically do the perfect kill, which is the sword right in through, I think, the shoulders into the bull's heart. So it dies supposedly quickly, of course, after an hour or half an hour or 20 minutes of this torture. And the bullfight I watched, of course, the bull would stop. He'd stop in the ring. He'd put his front feet down, and the blood was just coming all down his feet, and it would collect when he stopped. The blood would collect in the dirt, and then finally, at the end of that particular course, then the matador came up, killed the bull. The bull looked like, whoa, this is crazy. How'd I get here? And then just snorted blood and died, fell over on the dirt and died. And everybody's happy and cheering and yippee, and maybe they cut off an ear, I don't know, to throw to the senorita in the audience or something like that. And then when it's everybody's preoccupied with the matador taking his vows, the two donkeys come out with a harness, they throw a rope around the bull, and they drag it on out, out of the bull ring, and they start all over again.
And when the picadores first come out, and they make their first strike against the bull, how does the audience react?
Oh, they love it.
In other words, with every strike against the bull, every disabling strike, the body of people is cheering?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Unless it's, a first-time gringo like me who wants to puke. Oh, yeah.
So the sport then is actually enjoying the torture of the bull.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the crux of it is that. Now, again, there are people who defend it with the fact that it's the bravery of the matador and the artisticness of the matador and all these other kind of things. But, and I think Hemingway or Michener, I think, wrote about how, it's the cunning, the bravery and cunning of man who subjugates the great animal force. But it's really not, it's really not man against bull, give me a break. I mean, if the man and bull fought it out in the arena, the bull would win, no question about it.
Right.
So it's man's egocentric bloodlust in an organization of a lot of fellows getting together that subjugates that animal.
Any form of cruelty being a sport that they enjoy affects the rest of how they relate to life.
Oh, yeah, I would think so, sure.
But most people don't think about that.
Right.
They think, I can isolate this because it's a tradition, but if causing pain is a pleasure and you really enjoy it, where are we going with that, David?
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, it's interesting because in Mexico now, there are, after I wrote this piece, and I'm going to adjust it for the book that I'm writing with this collection of short stories, I've changed some of these short pieces, and I've found out since then that there's a credible poll that says that 70% of Mexicans now are opposed to bullfighting. 70%. And the state of Sonora in Mexico, the largest geographic state with almost 3 million people, has banned bullfighting.
I think that's beautiful.
Oh, yeah, it's incredible.
Because having grown up in cattle country, I can't even imagine nurturing a beautiful little baby bull, taking care of him all of his life, feeding him, brushing him, and having him go to the bullfight. I can't even imagine it.
Right.
I realized, growing up in cattle country, you can have a little bull that they're going to make into a steer, and someday he's going to be meat.
Mm-hmm.
But you know that when he goes to be meat, that the people that you deal with are going to make it sudden.
Right.
Absolutely sudden.
Right.
And between now and then, he's going to be treated with love and respect as a bull.
Right. Absolutely.
Or as a steer,
Sure,
as the case
sure.
may
Yeah,
be.
or an animal,
Yeah, well, whether he's castrated or not,
Right.
whatever life he had in the cattle country where I grew up
Right.
was a life of respecting and caring for your animal. Your animal was part of your domain, your living, your care, your responsibility. You had a responsibility to the animal to see that he had food and water and a vet if he needed it.
Sure.
Okay?
Right.
This was a responsibility. And anybody that was cruel to somebody's animal, it went over like a lead balloon.
Right.
And so bullfighting seems to be like, what planet are we on now?
Well, the irony of that is that that's exactly true for bulls that are raised to fight. Just what you said, they're taken care of, they're nurtured, they get the vet if they need it. They're taken care. They're the pride of the rancho. They raise these bulls to be these fierce, fighting bulls, and they take so much pride in them so that they can be slaughtered like that. It's crazy. No, no, yeah,
None
yeah.
of the slaughtering houses torture an animal.
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose. Not
right,
on purpose. Not with
exactly.
willful intent.
Right, yeah. It doesn't take, half an hour or an hour or whatever.
No, not
Yeah,
with willful
right,
intent.
Right.
So raising a bull from a baby, a little calf, knowing he's going to be your pride of your rancho and be tortured,
No,
that takes a little bit of. I don't even know what words to use.
Well,
I couldn't do that.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting anomalies about other cultures. Mexico, I mean, any other culture. I mean, how do we wrap our brain around some things that other cultures do in the name of tradition? And where did they start and why? And even if there is some reasonable explanation for it 3,000 years ago, I mean, come on, we're enlightened supposedly now, and we would have maybe grown out of that, hopefully. I mean, here we go again with, and I mentioned in this piece about what people do around the world in the name of tradition, and it's just barbaric in some cases, and yet it's all about because it's tradition. Doesn't anybody think about why?
I watched a movie not terribly long ago on the television, and it was about the old Aztec villages and whatnot, and they were capturing tribesmen and beheading them at a certain holiday of the year and casting their bodies down the long steps.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was just a movie, I presume. I don't know. But if it wasn't just a movie,
Right.
and it was a tradition, I mean, it used to be a tradition in Hawaii many years ago to jump a virgin in the volcano and sacrifice her
Right.
for,
Right.
so that the gods would be happy.
Right.
And if that's a tradition, is it still justified as a tradition because we always did it?
That's the question. That's the big question. And of course, no. And I think it's really fascinating that anybody who likes bullfighting, loves it or whatever, they fall back on one of the things they fall back on for justification is it's a tradition. It's a cultural tradition. Well, come on. I mean, in Mexico, it's a tradition for men to have mistresses, 2 or 3 maybe, if they can afford it. But do we say, well, that's okay because it's a tradition? I bet a lot of people who love bullfights don't like that idea. So the tradition argument just doesn't hold any water.
Well, let's step a little further into the real world. In Islam, parts of Islam, if a woman is raped, she's no longer pure, and
Right.
they can kill her.
Sure.
And that's the tradition.
Right.
A man can have as many sexual partners if he wants to, but even if the woman is raped and
Right.
it's not her fault,
Right.
he can kill her,
Sure.
and it's okay.
Right.
That's a tradition.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's insanity.
Absolutely insanity. Yeah.
It's insanity.
Right.
And you say, well, it's not the same, you're bringing on human versus animal thing, but let's get realistic. Our behavior toward life, human and animals, doesn't psychologically stop at the line. We're either sadistic or we're kind. I mean, I'm just talking about the psychological makeup of human beings.
Right. Sure.
If we're sadistic and we don't care about the feelings or life, anyone or anything,
Right.
we're running into a really barbaric world.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
And it's very interesting now that I think about it. I wrote this piece, and I put this piece in the Mazatlan Messenger, which is a little online magazine in Mexico, in Mazatlan, that I do a column for. And wow, I got more comments from this than I did on anything I've written. And some of the gringos there really, as they say, stripped the bark off of me. They were mad about me insulting their belief in that tradition. And they went so far as to say, if you can't handle the tradition in a country where you're living, where I was at the time, then just go away. Maybe you should go back and go to Disneyland for your vacation instead of Mexico,
Does that mean if we see an injustice in our own country and we can't handle it, that we should leave?
Yeah, I know,
That we shouldn't stand up in our own country and say, I don't like this, let's vote and change the law, let's do something about it because that's what America is based on.
Sure. Well, I think it's not only our country now, it's the world. I mean, we're citizens of the world.
Yeah.
And for us to ignore barbarism in other cultures, female mutilation in other cultures. I mean, they throw kids from high places and catch them in some cultures, babies. And for us to just say, oh, it's tradition and we're not going to interfere, that's just stupid. I mean, because if you're growing and you're enlightened or you're becoming more enlightened, I think you have a duty to share that with the planet.
If you have an intellectual and emotional evolution,
Sure.
we have to rise above sick traditions.
Right.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
We really do.
Oh, I think it's absolutely essential, and I don't understand how some people can differentiate between. I think animals are sentient,
Right.
They're aware. I mean, look in their eyes, and to how people can differentiate and say that it's okay to kill bulls in a bull ring and torture them, but because it's tradition, and then they can draw the line and say, well, but it's not okay maybe to do that to people. But it hasn't been too long ago that it's been okay to do that to people too.
Exactly, and it's still okay to do that to people in some countries.
Cultures, right.
In some countries, you have the honor killings.
Yeah.
In Islamic countries, it's okay to kill women because they're property.
Right.
Especially over any kind of insult. They had a murder case in Seattle not very long ago, where an Islamic man killed 3 of his daughters and 1 of his wives for dressing American.
Wow.
They were affronting his honor.
Yeah.
And it was okay according to his belief system.
Right.
They were property. Now, let's carry this one step further. They say, well, that's okay, they're just women and they're less human than men. Okay, these same countries think it's okay to kill the infidel. That's the non-believer. That's you.
Right.
That's everybody that doesn't belong to him. That's one of the things they're warring about. Where do we draw the line on unnecessary and stupid cruelty?
That's a great question. That's a great question.
We need to draw it someplace.
Well, hopefully, as we become more aware as a culture, as a world society, then people will start to draw that line and they'll say, no, that's not acceptable. And I think it's a great indication that Mexico and Spain, there are cities now in Spain that don't allow bullfighting. And Mexico is changing, and there's an arena, I just read recently, there's a big arena bull ring in Mexico City. I guess it's the largest maybe in the world. And historically, it could seat like 60 or 70,000 people.
Oh.
And it historically has had that many people at the bullfights. Well, I guess lately they're lucky to get 10,000 people to show up. So 10,000 people is still a lot of people,
Right.
but it's still a lot less than 60,000. So the trend is, I think the trend is unmistakable, which is good news, I think. I just thought of another thing that they talk about in terms of justification is that the wonderful horsemanship of the people in the bullfight, the crafted horsemanship where they have to dance around the bull and all this stuff. Well, again, I mean, if horsemanship is what it's about, then hey, why aren't the Lipizan stallions touring Mexico? But they aren't. And it's interesting too. Also, back in the day of Hemingway and Michener and those folks, or Hemingway primarily, the picadors would come out on horses, but they weren't padded, and they used to lose sometimes 6 or 8 horses in a bullfight that were gored and killed by the bull.
Oh.
So not only was the bull tortured and killed, but they lose horses as well.
Well, the bull's fighting for his life. What do they expect?
Well, of course.
That just gets dumber by the minute.
Oh, absolutely.
It just ups the ante. Now you're sacrificing horses and maybe a guy or two, and isn't this fun?
Right. Yeah. It's just crazy. In defense of Mexico, let's say, I do think that it's changing. Like I said earlier, I believe it's changing, and I think that those people, that culture, those folks down there are, they're smart people like everybody else in the world, left, to their own devices and left out of the control of the government and all these kind of things. And I think it's changing, and I think that it's a part of the worldwide awareness. The communication in the world is fabulous now, and it's really helping people become aware. And Mexico has got this emerging middle class, and so they don't depend on things like bullfighting for entertainment anymore. They don't depend on bullfighting to make them feel better about their life that's got to go nowhere, maybe.
Right.
They've got other things going on, and I think that it's all good. I think it's going in a good direction.
And that's a great thing.
Yeah.
So to reach out in loving understanding and building some creative, caring world to live in is really important.
Yeah. Hence, we write about things that we think are not loving and caring and responsible. So. And I mean, I was, at first when I wrote this piece, I got all this blowback and these people were really on my case. And that affected me for a while. And then I thought, who cares what these people think,
Dave, you know that I love your writing because it makes people think. You don't write anything that doesn't make people think. And I think that that's marvelous because there's too little thinking going on.
Yeah.
And I think we all need it. Stop and analyze something. People that do things that are thoughtless aren't always bad. That's not what I want to put across here. They're
Sure.
not bad people. They're people that don't know better. They do it because it's all they know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it is not a matter of pointing a finger and saying you're bad. It's a matter of saying this particular behavior pattern isn't healthy.
Sure, absolutely. I don't think anybody, well, there are exceptions, but most people don't do things necessarily to be mean, or cruel. I
Right.
think it's just something that they don't have any maybe control over at the time.
Or understand.
Right.
The greatest problem we have in humanity is people go along to get along because all of their friends won't like them.
Right. Right.
And you stop and think like that. If you have to think like somebody else thinks or they don't like you, they've never liked you to start with
Right.
because
Right. Exactly.
then they only like you if they can't use you, they have no use for you.
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
it doesn't work. It
Right.
isn't a balance.
Right.
But we don't know that when we're young. We want to fit in, and this is the crisis that teenagers face every day.
Right.
They want to fit in with their friends, so they do dumb things to be accepted. When you stop and think about it, if they were really your friend, would they ask you to take that risk?
Right, right.
No.
Yeah. Well, I see grown-ups doing that too, wanting
Yes.
to fit in. Yeah.
Yes.
Stephen Hawking said recently at some conference a couple of years ago that he said that one of the greatest threats to humanity isn't being hit by an asteroid or tidal waves or global warming, it's human aggression. He said that was what he considers the biggest threat to humanity is human aggression.
Well, it's the thing we're most afraid of is each other. Stop and
Yeah,
look at
yeah.
it. We are more afraid of what the other human beings are going to do to us than anything on earth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true, yeah.
It's very true. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And thank you.
Always
and,
a pleasure.
I'm glad you brought on a controversial subject. I think it's a good thing for people to think.